I can't fit laugh. Kemi Oluloyo don't spit out fire. She can't talk, say they know they call Tinubu Jagaban for nothing. No. He say if people lace the courtroom with sleeping juju, Peter Obi was lucky he did not show up. Something terrible would have happened to him. That was why Tinubu was asked to stay away. She said because that one had the juju, wetin the juju carry. He supposed stay away, make the thing not catch am. My people, he said Tinubu no dey play with the ambition. No, you see whether you don't ever see Izekome, they sleep for court before. My people, this video they work package concerning this old tribunal of a thing. The evidence, people don't sit down, they don't read wetin they talk for court, they don't take am step by step, they don't use their eyeglasses, they look am in depth, they don't see and say the error too plenty, the error they flow like water. Our people say the meaning be say when dirty too plenty for soup, blind person go see. You no need to go school, make you understand say the verdict wey these judges them give favor the ruling party. There is God though.
But for you, what came out to you the most in that judgment?
Well, I think the judgment is a sad day for Nigerians. Sad because I thought the judiciary would have been interested in expanding the progress we've made in election management. I do not have difficulties, I do not have issues with them finding in favor of Tinubu as being duly elected. By their own logic, they can arrive at that conclusion if they want. But I didn't like that they talked down on the petitioners. The language was quite intemperate. The language, I was the star witness in the case in 2018. I didn't see this kind of talking down on the petitioners. I mean, it is the part of the electoral process for us to go to court instead of going to the streets. And to make it sound like the petitioners were frivolous and use such intemperate language, I was a little disturbed. Second one is that I'm ashamed as a Nigerian. Nigerians want to join BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. I'll take 3 examples. Brazil, India, and South Africa are known democracies. Brazil conducted an election, and that election was a big election, and I will figure out how many people voted in that election. So in the case of India, they had 911 million registered voters. Over 600 million people voted. 3.9 million machines were used for that election. Nobody went to court. Not one person. The Congress Party accepted the result. The world has moved on. Nobody goes to court anymore now for election. And there was a voter turnout of 67%. In the case of Brazil, there were 92,000 voting stations. There was 79% voter turnout. 79% in Brazil. And it was done with DRE machines, and there were some also paper machines involved. But in all that voting, the electronic system was subjected to public review. The political parties were present, and there was a public review. So the countries that are in the BRICS, they don't go to court after elections. The election management is such that people do not just go to court. The system is clear.
Are we gradually moving towards it?
It's a shame that our judiciary did not have strong words for INEC. Now, let me tell you, three people issued reports on this election. IRI, NDI from the US, EU from Europe, and YAGA from Nigeria. In all their reports, YAGA said INEC did not meet public expectation. IRI said, despite positive expectations, election fell short. EU said, election exposed systemic weaknesses and therefore signals a need for further legal and operational reforms to enhance transparency, inclusiveness. So instead of rambling about whether the regulations is in contradiction to the law or not, I was expecting the judiciary to be tough on INEC on that you don't need to create these ambiguities. if you created rules for the election, then follow the rules. It shouldn't be their headache whether it was the act said so or not. But by INEC telling everybody that this is the process, and there is something that I don't know if everybody is missing. In that election, the rule was that you will snap the result to the beavers and upload to the IREV. The idea is that when you get to the manual collation center at the ward, that the person in that collation center will verify the result you brought physically with the one that was uploaded. That is why if you go to the IREV, the result from Rivers State on the IREV is different from the result announced on the INEC website. If you tabulate the result on the beavers, on some EC8As, with the one on the ward collation, then you will see the disparity. It happened in parts of Benue. Labour Party came up with that. PDP came with a strong case of failures in about almost 25,000 polling units where the rules were not followed. We listed those places and we came with an expert witness who tendered them. The court said no, that the expert witness, we should have put his witness statement on oath in the petition when we were sending in the petition. But it was when we brought the case to court that the court gave us permission to go and inspect INEC material. It was the expert investigation report of the materials, inspection of the materials, that gave right to the witness statement on oath. So there was no way you could have said something you hadn't seen. INEC needed to give us certified true copies of results for us to verify that INEC stayed by its own regulations. So there were 9,000 cases of overvoting in the election. 9,000 cases. There were almost 15,000 cases of where the INEC presiding officers did not follow the rules.
As identified by the PDP.
As identified by the PDP.
How come that the PDP was find it difficult in the eye of this very trial court to prove this case with evidence?
So we came with an expert witness. But they said that the expert witness ought to have been put as part of the petition, the witness on oath. We subpoenaed him because we couldn't have done that without the man having to review the work of INEC. And we got only the power to review when the case started. So we couldn't have joined that with our petition.
One will imagine that there are copies of the results in several copies.
Yes.
The one for the agents, the INEC, and all what have you.
Yes.
And the PDP agents privy to the copies, or don't they have the copies?
Yes, we have the copies.
Yes, that is the position of the court.
Yes,
that you should have come forward with, prove your evidence with the one that you have and the one that you're disputing.
Right. The one we are disputing is the one that INEC certified. So we needed to see the INEC certified to be sure that what our agents are showing us is correct. It is upon comparing the two that we're able to make a case and say, yes, this is consistent. Doesn't it make sense? The ones our agents have are duplicate copies. So sometimes it's not very clear, but when you get the INEC certified copy, then you can see whether it was not stamped, it was not signed, it was the number of
when you deny that access.
So we got that access, and it is based on that access, after the petition has started, that the expert witness made his case and was subpoenaed to come and tender it. The court said, and I don't want to quarrel with the judiciary on this. I think that it is their right to interpret the law as they deem fit. But my point is the wider issue of the disgrace that Nigeria suffers. The process of going to court, it looks to me like two institutions don't want our elections to go well. The first institution is INEC. INEC is a monumental disgrace. INEC is an organization that I'm ashamed of to associate as a Nigerian. Because the promises INEC made, the promises they made with Anambra election, the Ekiti election, the Osun election. I came on this year program and called for a third-party verification of the INEC system so that we are sure that on an election day, that what is going to happen that day will not lead to a glitch. On election day, INEC said there was a glitch. When they did a mock election, they did it only in 463 or so polling units. That was small. The EU report pointed out that INEC did not test this system for a large-scale election like it did. But despite not testing the system, it's a shame that INEC goes to court to question whether not complying with its regulations is a fact, doesn't make it a ground to cancel an election. What is important in Nigeria going forward is that we have elections, like I cited. Why do we want to be amongst the BRICS if we can't conduct a simple election? India, 900 million people, and they conducted. Indonesia, 190 million registered voters, and they conduct elections.
I mean, you imagine that from your summation,
yes,
that the election of 2023, the presidential election, was a sham.
It's a joke. Okay. Because let me tell you, the votings happened at the polling unit. There were people inferred that if we had seen the results from the polling unit and they went to collation and collated what we saw on the polling unit, I can bet you nobody will be in court. And it is possible President Tinubu will have won. It's possible.
So you don't believe in one?
So it's possible, but if you go by the allegations we made about the disparities in the election, then he didn't win.
Okay. So now I'd like to ask you, do you believe in the 6.984520 million votes that Atiku Abubakar got?
If I believe or not, will mean that I need to start substantiating them.
So the question I'm asking
yes,
is that Atiku Abubakar won in Osun State.
Yes.
Atiku Abubakar won in Adamawa State.
Yes.
But those fraudulently won too.
Okay, let me tell you what the problem is. The problem is not winning. I didn't think that APC will not win 30% of the votes cast or something to that effect. Well, what you see is that you go to a state like Kebbi, Atiku Abubakar comes first, and by the time the collation is finished, the difference between him and Tinubu reduces to 10,000, 15,000 votes. So the problem was not in who won a state. It is in the differential, how the results were added to cause a reduced differential in votes. So the issue is not about winning. You see, it's deceptive. Let me take the Southeast, for instance. P2B won the Southeast outrightly. And let me tell you why he did so. Because the mood in the Southeast was like the mood in the North in 2015, when the North felt it was their turn to take back power from President Jonathan. Nobody doubted that there were millions of voters turning up in the North because they were heavily mobilized, as the Igbos were heavily mobilized in viewing that this time is our turn to produce a president. So when you look at the result, that's not the problem. The problem is that in some places there were issues. And like I said, the election of 2023 has come and gone, and it's a disaster by INEC. They delegitimize President Tinubu's win. So if he had won the election, the lack of legitimacy is because of how INEC behaved in that election. If INEC had had a problem with its servers on election day, and there was issue of non-transmission, I mean, it can happen. There was a glitch. I agree with them. What they needed to have done after the election is to scan all their hard copies and populate it in the IREV and said, the ones that were not sent on the polling unit day, we had the hard copies. This is it. Nigerians can go there and review. They could have called for a review of the election. In the case of, I think it was in Brazil, when Bolsonaro said he doubted that the results were as was done, the court refused him to even go further because there has been reviews after the election. And the court said, no, you can't challenge it. And fined him for coming to the court for that. Because INEC ought to have said to everybody, look, don't worry about whether we transmitted electronically or not. After the election, see all our results. It was the same behavior that JAMB did during that Mesoma's case. JAMB just came up and said, look at the server time. At 10:20, she tested this to the result. This is what the server gave her back. She tested it again. This is what the server gave her back. They produced evidence. So nobody could fault JAMB, a public institution, fighting to retain its integrity, decided to make open his system and said, this girl was testing this thing. He tested it 4 times.
But in the case of INEC, you don't think the integrity is there?
No, the integrity is not there because they ought to have said to everybody, this is the results.
Let's look at the politics of the election. Atiku Abubakar got 6,984 votes, 520 votes. Peter Obi got 6,101,533 votes, while Bola Tinubu got 8,794,726. But you will look at it, the totality of that vote, if you put together, because there are those who believe that the reason, majorly, why if Peter Obi and Atiku had been in the same camp, maybe they would have won the election. And you look at it, if you put out the votes, the 6 million votes of over 6 million votes of Peter Obi and over 6 million votes of Atiku Abubakar, it gives you 13,086,053 votes, as against the Bola Tinubu of 8,794 votes. Atiku and Peter Obi got 11,262,978 votes in 2019.
Yes.
Don't you think it's the political issues around the election that caused this? Maybe.
So that's another story, and I would say loudly and clearly. That's why I said the court could have found that Tinubu won the election. And a review of INEC data by a third party and review could have found the same result. But I'm saying, by putting this aura of infamy around the election, of misbehavior, what you have done is that they have delegitimized the election, because the point you're making is a very strong point. Nowhere do opposition parties split their votes against an incumbent government. But in this particular election, the APC was not a very popular party. And if you, like you said, if you put together the two votes, plus if you put Kwankwanso's votes, which are over 1 million, over a million, it would have been like 14 million.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but the question remains that what INEC did on the election day, which is why I'm holding them responsible, will have made it that nobody will have gone to court. If they have just said, hey guys, no problem, everybody, here are our results. Because like you said, this 6 million, 8 million here, that's it. See how it came about. But we know that there was a case like River State, where what was done in the polling unit was not what was reported. A case like Benue, where what was done was not what was reported. A case like the PDP brought, where there were about 25,000 polling units, where there were infractions of various types. Now, whether those infractions will substantially change the result of the election, we will not know unless we did that tabulation. And that tabulation will have been easy for INEC to have just said.
Where do we go from here?
Yes, where we go from here. I think there are three important issues. One is that I'm going to campaign seriously for a constitutional amendment that requires us not to swear in, to finish court cases before the swearing in of a president. I think it delegitimizes presidents when they are in office, making decisions, and they are subject of election petitions. I don't think it is good for Nigeria. I think we need to do that. And that means that we should take presidential cases straight to the highest court. In the case of Brazil, I find an interesting phenomenon. The election, they have an election court, which at the beginning of an election, the justices of the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, and the Federal High Court elect two judges, justices from there to that court. And the president nominates 2 lawyers who are not judges to be in the panel, so that everybody sees the transparency of what was done. The kind of unanimous judgments we are getting today in Nigeria is disturbing, because under Buhari and Obasanjo, always had 2-1, 3-1, 4-2, 5-2. Reason, judges who believe in substantive justice, who don't believe in procedural, that we should use procedure to damage justice, have come out like Oguntade to say that he thinks Buhari won the election because of this substantial non-compliance. But the majority had their way. We've had somebody like the former High Ambassador to Washington, who said that the 2003 election falls short of all expectations. So the nature of our justice system now makes it that I think we should have a special court for election petitions. Mm-hmm. And I think at the highest court of the land, we should determine who is president before swearing in. Second one, I think that being president with 33% of the votes in a multi-party election is a little disturbing. It doesn't give you a strong mandate. So I think we should put that 50% clause in our constitution. After the first election, the two top candidates will go out to get 50%. The reason being, it will force us at that time to vote against our ethnic divisions. We must choose of the two that we're seeing. So I think we need to put that. The third one is that I think that the Electoral Act, since the courts always rely on the Electoral Act, I think we need to annex what is in the INEC guideline into the Electoral Act. Both the EU, IRI, and YAGA talks about ambiguities in the Electoral Act. So maybe we need to be more specific about the procedure for elections in Nigeria to improve transparency. Finally, I think that it's a sad and shameful thing for Nigeria after 24 years of democracy to still be going through this type of process.
Well, before I go to the general overview of the judgment, Sumner, it is important for me to lay the foundation. Justice Haruna Zamani, at the beginning of the tribunal, had already assured Nigerians that his tribunal will not rely on technicalities, that they will rely on substantial justice. And so Nigerians were very hopeful, and they had their trust and confidence in the judiciary, believing that substantial justice will reign. But when we came to the final judgment, what we saw was more of technicalities than substantial justice. Now, I saw so many things which are enumerated. One, I saw a judge who was reading his own judgment, who did not even understand the judgment itself. He was struggling to read the judgment. I saw in that same district a judge who threw away something that was on a credible online website, which is Amazon website. He threw it away on the basis of the fact that the person who presented the document is an interested party, when ordinarily the document is verifiable and the contents can still be verified. Then I saw a judge who went further to begin to analyze. A judge is supposed to be impartial, but a judge was analyzing to say, Obi won this, Obi won that, Obi won that. Why should he complain when that is not impartiality? That is trying to justify why you are taking a position in the matter. I believe. Was this something political? He was more political than judicial or legal. Then I saw a judge who was saying that a serious opposition. Now, this is a judge who is supposed to be impartial. He's saying a serious opposition does not need INEC. So if we don't need INEC, who do we need in the election? We don't even need the court. It is INEC that we need. If INEC had done their work very well, we don't need to go to the court. So for her to say that social media, we are using the social media to intimidate them. We are not using social media. Social media is a congregation of Nigerians. Nigerians from all walks of life, either within the country or in diaspora. And these Nigerians congregate to share ideas in order to move the nation forward. And in that, we have to examine and reassess what the justices are likely to do and what we anticipate from the justices. It is not out of the question. So if we do that and we analyze and then they come and do something which is contrary to general expectation, then we will now begin to ask ourselves, where did we get it wrong or where did they get it wrong? These are the two areas. So we are now examining where did we get it wrong or where did they get it wrong? And we saw that the justices, with due respect, we are not lawyers, but even the law says in certain degree, a man who is considered to be reasonable can still give judgment in certain areas. That is why in overseas you have jury type of judgment, where reasonable people are brought to look at and examine and say, okay, this one is guilty, or this one is not guilty, or this is this, or this is not this. But if you look at, there are two certificates that are currently subsisting. One, that the of one who certificates of Bola Tinubu, President Bola Tinubu. Two certificates are currently existing. One that was issued on June 27, 1979, and the one that was issued on June 22nd, 1979. Two certificates. One was brought and submitted, and that was not the one that the school is certifying that it is from them. So now these two certificates are an issue of contention. We have gone to the school now, and we are in America to try to unearth what is actually the issues behind this.
Yeah, I'm bringing this up because I read that Atiku Abubakar is in the U.S. court, urging the U.S. court to quickly expedite action on that suit before it, so that he can use that to beef up his appeal to the Supreme Court. How true is that?
Well, it is important that new evidence can be introduced in law. So if we are going for an appeal and we have additional new evidence to justify our appeal, I'm sure that the Supreme Court, with a larger heart, will look at it. And so we want to go to the Supreme Court fully confident that we have sufficient and enough evidence that the Supreme Court will have no option than to say, okay, Atiku Abubakar, you are declared the winner and you are hereby returned. Go and collect your certificate of return as the president of the federal
Even
government.
after winning about 21 states and so on, because Tinubu is saying that, look, when it comes to substantial compliance to the electoral law, I won more states than any of the other political parties, and then, of course, I had more spread than any of the other political parties. Do you think that the Supreme Court can actually go ahead to deliver judgment to someone who didn't have two-thirds based on what INEC declared?
You see, our contention is not about what INEC declared. If we are satisfied with what INEC declared, then there will have been no need for us to go to court. We are satisfied that INEC didn't do the right thing. And so in their declaration, they made grave errors. And those grave errors are the ones that led us to the tribunal. Ordinarily, we would have loved to do the Goodluck Jonathan's option, to say, okay, winner, we congratulate you. But in Nigerian situation, when the umpire is already biased, is not impartial, then you are forced to try to go to court to seek redress. And so in that case, whether you say you are number 1 or number 2 or number 3, in our own estimation, and the reason why we have gone to court is to say you do not merit that position. That is why in our argument, and when one of the justices was arguing that the only way you can prove substantial non-compliance or overvoting is at the polling unit. And we have argued, rightly too, that that is not the only way to prove overvoting. In the case of Ekiti State, for instance.
You mentioned Ekiti.
Yes, I mentioned Ekiti. In the case of Ekiti, we are complaining that the total number of accredited voters who are to vote in Ekiti State is 300,000 on the dot. Now, Bola Tinubu scored 200,000 of that vote. Atiku scored 100,000 of that vote. Labour Party scored 11,000 of that vote, and Accord Party scored 10,000 of that vote. The number of votes that the candidates scored is higher than the number of people who were accredited to vote. So that's overvoting. And that is what we are saying. So the justices have confirmed to us that they have not really and critically examined the documents, and that they just gave judgment on the basis of their own sentiments. The previous justices of the Supreme Court used to take certain key positions that they do not want to upstage the apple cart because they don't want to leave a country without a president. And so, because our jurisprudence was being deepened by their judgments. Now, in 2007, it was a 3-3, and then Justice Weiss casted the casting vote, and then Eradua won. However, due to the pressure of the opposition, Eradua was compelled to say, okay, his election was flawed, but that he would do something. And then he set up a committee headed by Justice Weiss to draw up, a concrete and judicial way forward for Nigeria, electoral way forward for Nigeria, which he did. And the opposition drummed that, on good luck, the implementation of the OS report, the implementation, and good luck, in good faith and in honor, decided to implement fully
well, not fully, some segment, because one of the recommendations was that the judiciary, that's the NJC, should be allowed to actually call for the appointment of the INEC chairman and then, of course, INEC secretary or INEC deputy chairman, but that one was thrown away by FEC. And of course, INEC's full independence and all of that, including that the date to set, the power to set the date for election should be removed from INEC, but of course, the FEC didn't approve that part.
Well, if you say INEC is independent, how can you now be removing certain powers from them? If you begin to remove certain powers from them, then they are not independent. But the fact of the matter is that the judiciary and INEC are two things that we always call independent, who are not independent, because they are supposed to draw their statutory allocation directly as a first line charge, not to rely on government. Once government is the one approving your budget, approving your request,
including appointment of recs and all of that.
Exactly. Then it becomes a problem for the Nigerian judiciary, because they will not be able to dispense justice as at when due and as when required. So what we are saying generally, in essence, is that we need a quick judicial reform. The judges, as it is now, and the justices that were there before, have different orientation and different training. For instance, we didn't have to have any eyes on Justice Nikitobi. We don't have to have any eyes on Justice Kayode Esho. We don't have to have any eyes on Chukwudifo Oputa, because we know that by their conscience, they will deliver what is called substantial justice, and that every Nigerian will believe that this is justice served. But again, I'm not condemning these justices. In the Supreme Court, we have eminent jurists like Justice Emmanuel Agim. I give him respect. There's Justice Joro. There are quite a number of them there that when they speak law and they speak to their
justice. Actually, they offer the same justice.
Yes. So I believe that the Supreme Court is a much more deepened in electoral jurisprudence. That when people, you can imagine, for instance, Wike in his first tenure was removed by the Election Petitions Tribunal. The Court of Appeal affirmed it, but when he went to the Supreme Court overturned it and confirmed him as the governor. Reason is being that the Supreme Court came up with a very clear theory that the smart card reader that was recently that was put in use then. It was put in use then, was not intended to supplant the voters register, and that the voters register remains the final place of accreditation. And so if you have less people on the smart card reader being accredited, but the voters register is saying more people have been accredited, the Supreme Court said the voter register takes precedence. And so these are some of the things that we are talking about. All
right, just before we come to a conclusion of this chat, I want you to react to the ongoing war between the former vice president and current vice president Shettima, saying that, look, he has retired Atiku Abubakar himself, and his principal Bola Tinubu have retired Atiku Abubakar, and they will be sending him to Fombina to go and start engaging animal husbandry. And then, of course, Atiku and his team hit him back, saying that, look, that is not statesmanly. When you're a president or vice president, your choice of words ought to be very statesmanly. What do you make of that? Having worked in the office of the vice president yourself.
I have discovered that Shettima has a very crude sense of humor, in a way. Perhaps he was trying to, bring his own type of dry jokes, to bear on the polity. But in making such type of utterances, he had to be careful. He had already initially called the former vice president an ice cream seller.
Which a lot of people didn't take lightly, which people despite the phone and all of that.
Even after the phone and so forth. So I think he is gradually becoming the chief comedian of Asoro.
You have said a number of times, and I do recall, that you're not really a Labour Party member, but you're an obedient. So help us understand, did the Labour Party fail to gather enough evidence, like you said, which you said was supposed to be overwhelming for the judiciary? Did they fail to gather enough evidence in terms of paper collected across the country to say, these are the papers? We're not even waiting for INEC to present its own on IREV or anywhere else, but we have the documentary evidence. Did it fail?
So the thing about the courts is that we have three arms of government, right? Judiciary, executive, and legislative arm of government. Judiciary is very powerful, and it depends on when you bring your evidence to court. The court will say, that, oh, this is not admissible in the court, or it doesn't do any of that. Like I said earlier, that was the essence where we needed a live transmission, so that it's not even the justices saying, if there were no evidence that were brought forth, every one of us would have seen that. For me, that was afar from all the proceedings. And you saw where there were people who were transcribing what was happening. They were almost acting as stenographers, transcribing and telling us what was happening in the courts. And we saw the picture. We saw the boxes where they say this exhibit had been entered into court, this evidence, these are materials from these places, this polling unit. And to hear the justices say that, oh, there were not even a single polling unit where there were how did they even put it now? Where specific polling units that were mentioned and all of that. It sounds odd. And so for us, reading it, it's listening to them and watching them would have been, if we had also seen the live proceedings, the live transmission had been allowed, so that people will be able to see these things and say they were not there. For this, the person that would best answer this question would be the counsel to the petitioners, for them to say, did they not bring any of these things out? For I, as a citizen who watch all of those boxes that were of evidence that were brought in, they even had video evidence that were shown to them. And then it's all for the court to come and say that, oh, there are no evidence that was put before them that they want to use. Because at the end of the day, you have a situation whereby there are a bunch of people that are going to just put out the wordings there, oh, as the court pleases, whatever it says at the court pleases. And I look forward to a time where at the court pleases will be replaced by as long as it ensures justice or something in that nature. So I would be in a position to say, for what I saw as a citizen, and from what came out of the courts, from the pictures and the words, the typing that a lot of people put out there, the transcription that a lot of people put out there were evidence that were put before them. Is that the evidence that the court now decide to accept, or it doesn't have to decide? They are the final at that particular place in their courtroom to do what they want to do. And if they don't accept this evidence at the end of the day, there is really nothing you can do.
In one sentence, then, do you think that the evidence was overwhelming in terms of the documentary, the documents, the paper that were presented, that were collated by Labour Party? Do you think it was overwhelmingly clear that the party won? In just 1 or 2 seconds.
I think it was overwhelmingly clear that the party won. Indeed, yes, I believe that. And there were a lot of things that were put before them. What they decide to use, I don't have control over that. Nobody has control over that. They are the ones who have control over what they're going to admit, they are going to allow to be admissible in the court as evidence, and what is not going to be allowed to be admissible in the court as evidence. And that's where transparency comes to play. That's where when people were asking for that live transmission, there's nothing wrong in having put out that live transmission, so that every one of us would have sat here to be able to say, oh, even before the judgment, to say, oh, maybe they didn't put out enough evidence, or no, they had enough evidence, and all of that. And also, like, just to add to it again, I'm talking about transparency now, is the fact that all eyes on the judiciary became something that it became almost as if I don't know, almost a crime. What is wrong with people saying we want to put the judiciary on the spotlight, we want to check the judiciary? And I think this was an opportunity for the Nigerian judiciary to actually welcome the scrutiny that is coming from citizens, because for the first time, citizens now seem to be interested in the things that are happening in it, and it was really important for that. But unfortunately, you saw a situation whereby the justices, there was anger, and I think the female amongst them, I'm sorry, I don't have her name, where she was saying that, oh, people think they can stay on social media and intimidate them. Nobody is intimidating you. What is being done is that people are saying, let's put an eye, let's scrutinize, let's see what. That's what being an active citizen is all about. That's what occupying your office of the citizen is all about. To put an eye on the different aspect of governance that is happening and follow it through. And at the end of the day, for me, on that day, was also the fact that in that room, getting to the court, everywhere was cordoned off. armed security agents were all over the place, cordoned off the place. And then when you got inside the courtroom also, there were so many from the executive, even though to me, this government is an illegitimate government. It didn't win the election, and that's my own personal opinion as Aisha Yusufu. And you had the NSA, the chief of staff, the vice president, of course, who should be there because it's also one of the respondents, and all manner of people being there. The National Security Advisor was in the courtroom, and yet the justices didn't feel intimidated by all of this thing. It's just citizens who are on social media saying, all eyes on the judiciary, don't drop the ball, keep focusing on them, that became the ones that were intimidating. That I found was a bit baffling, honestly.
Right, so if we look at the unanimous decision of the Presidential Election Petition Court affirming President Bola Tinubu's election as president of Nigeria, in your opinion, what are the key takeaways from this judgment, or dare I say the significance of such a unanimous verdict in such a high-profile case in terms of its broader implications for Nigeria's legal and electoral system, seeing as most of all our electoral petitions end up in court? No matter what happens, it ends up in court. Are you concerned that this judgment will affect voter turnout in the next 4 years? And as a civil rights activist yourself, between now and the next presidential elections, what should we start to do on ground to make sure that come the next round of elections, we are prepared and even the body language signals a readiness for the electoral body and INEC as a whole?
It's very concerning what has happened, and before I answer your question is to say that there's a reason before when it comes to gubernatorial election and some other election, they ended at the Court of Appeal. They didn't go to the Supreme Court, but after a while there was a reason why. Even though sometimes we have unanimous decision, there was a reason why it was not decided that it can't end there, that they will have to take them also to the Supreme Court. The most worrying aspect of all of this is the fact that we also an election where INEC had come out to say they had their own guideline, and they came out to say this was what they were going to do. They were going to transmit a result electronically to the IRF. Even when in November 2022, there were a group of people that had come out to say that, look, INEC was not going to do that transmission. There was something fishy that was going on, which is what later on played out. INEC will come out to vehemently deny that any of that they were going to use all of this thing. And at the end of the day, on election day, at the same day, there were 3 elections that took place, that of presidential, the senatorial, and also the House of Rep. 2 of them had no issues. They were uploaded. They had no glitches. Everything went on. But when it came to that of the presidential election, there were glitches, and these things didn't go on. So which sort of like pointed out more to sabotage. And then you have before the 2023 election, this whole system had been tested, I think Edo and some other states. And even when you had the gubernatorial election, there were no issues. The issues was mainly when it came to the presidential election. Free, fair, and credible election must be seen to be free, fair, and credible election. And where you do not have free, fair, and credible election, many people would not want to vote. And that's the biggest concern that we have right now. The reason why people decided to be invested and interested. There are people who were in their 70s, in their 60s, who had never voted before in Nigeria. They voted this election because they finally felt, okay, one, the words from the assurances that came from INEC that they were going to do this electronic transmission, because many people do know that it is normally when they do that collation, when manual papers are traveling from one place to the other, that a lot of changes happen. And so people had confidence when INEC gave their word. And then the new Electoral Act also made people to be more confident in election and find that, okay, finally their vote is going to count, their vote is going to matter. But here we saw the brazenness that happened, the impunity, the way and manner in which the rigging was done in such a way that numbers were changed, figures were changed. You see, let me give a hypothetical example. You see something like 212, and then you turn the 2 and 1 and make it a big fat 0, and then you now turn it to 2, and then they cancel, they use TPEX, correcting fluid, to correct and write on it, and then change another person's numbers for it to correct. And these things were uploaded, blank sheets were uploaded, and at the end of the day, there is not a single thing in that judgment that talked about INEC, you know, in a way and manner that INEC will not continue the institutional rascality that it displayed in the last election with such impunity. And so now what has happened is that with the judgment that we have, INEC has been given an enabling environment for them to do whatever they want to do and then just get away with it. And then you begin to ask, why then did people waste their money? Because this is also a civilian and political coup. And I've said it before, and I'm going to repeat it here again. The way we treat military coup is the same way we treat civilian and political coup. Because when you take away the mandate of the people, when you steal the mandate of the people, that in its own way is a coup also. Look, one thing that we all must understand is that the outcome of the election does not matter. If there was free, fair, credible election, if there was that transmission of results the way INEC was said they were going to do it, and the results all came out, and everybody saw it was transparent, and the results at the end of the day is still what it is today, everybody would have moved on, because it would have meant that there were more Nigerians who wanted the government, the then government, to continue. But that isn't the case, and that is where we must be focused on. And please, 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 Nigerians must stop this thing that we do every time, to sweep things under the carpet and say, oh, it has happened, let's move on. There will be a murder somewhere, somebody will come and tell you, but the person has died, now why are you following the case? And that's why these things keep repeating themselves, because we keep giving an enabling environment for all of these things to happen. Systems must work the way they're supposed to be. Processes must be followed. There must be accountability. And where anything is not done, people must be punished for not doing the right thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Asha, help me understand. In terms of where we go from here, let's focus on the civil society. We know that quite a few of them did make some noise, to use the parlance of the words coming out from Gabon. People did make some noise, civil society. But immediately after the result came out from the petition tribunal, there is not a lot of noise being made. It seems there was a calm. There was actually some palpable fear that there was going to be some kind of uproar or some kind of anarchy, and there were policemen all around the place. Even some soldiers did come out. But there is nothing. It's been quiet. So what is expected of the civil society organizations going forward in terms of preparation for the next thing that we expect will take this nation to whatever level we desire it to go? Civil society organizations' role.
Okay, I will talk about this. Before I talk about the civil society organization rules, I think for me, I'll commend the citizens of Nigeria. One of the things we must understand is that we need more, Nigeria needs more active citizens and less of activists. This is what we've seen with the 2022 election. We saw the role that citizens have played, just participating in the election and ensuring that, you know, they focus, they campaign, they do all the things that we're good. And we've seen the difference that has happened. Right now, there's a need to also keep people motivated and not disillusioned about the whole election and going away. So there's a need for, I think even the civil society, civil society organization, there's a need for there to be, how do I put it now, an effort towards crossover. And what do I mean by this crossover? Moving people from activism from that area into politics. One of the things we must understand is that politics and activism, the end results are always the same. It's supposed to be for the greater good of the people, though Nigerian politics is the one that is seen as if people are supposed to go in there and loot money and be there for their selfish reasons. It's supposed to be for the greater good of the people. And so where activists and that civil society are making demands, those in politics are the ones who are fixing this demand. So there's a need for that one crossover, because we have a lot of competent people who have character capacity, even though they don't have the money that is usually used in the Nigerian context when it comes to election. Let them get into politics. Being in politics doesn't necessarily mean running for office. even when it comes to party leadership, that's also something that needs to be, because we need to talk about that. The other thing also that needs to happen is to civil education is very important. Let people understand what role it is for them to continue to be on this whole issue, to not just get disappointed and leave, and the roles that citizens can also play. And then there's also the need for independence of judiciary, independence of media itself. We've had there hasn't been a lot of independence. The civil societies should help to strengthen our media, to strengthen our judiciary system. The civil society also should look at, when it comes to campaign financing, is there anything that can be done? Because this situation we have whereby it is the people who have a lot of money, or people who have stolen our commonwealth, that have the money to be able to perpetuate themselves, or their stooges in office. If we continue to do that, we will not get the best people, the most competent people that will come out and lead our nation. And we have a lot of competent people who don't have the money that they're going to waste, or not just campaigning an election, and also in going to court. Then there's also another thing, when it comes to parallel vote tabulation, there's a need to do that. This whole dependence on only INEC being the one that gives, that was supposed to give the results in real time. The civil society, citizens, even media itself should all come together, and let's have a parallel vote tabulation method, where we have a particular place, just like the IRF that they have, where these results from all over the polling units, as soon as they are being brought up, because as people who go to vote, you can take the pictures of those. Let's upload it in this particular place. Yes, it might not be admissible in the court, because it's only the one that from the polling unit agents and the ones from INEC that will be admissible in the court. But it will help people to see what these results are, and it will also force the hands of the umpire, which is INEC now in itself, to be able to say, look, there is something that is going on. These results are already there. So even if when they're thinking of beginning to change the result, probably they might have a little bit of hesitation or shame, or not just knowing that there's a spotlight on them that is being done. Beyond also the civil society, I think I'll just quickly take on the international organization, Committee of Nations, to say there needs to be a universally accepted standard of what free, fair, credible election is all about. Situations where we have the kind of election in Nigeria and places like Gabon and Niger, Zimbabwe, different from the kind of election in places like the United States of America, France, Britain, Germany. It has to stop. Where, if certain people are killed in certain places like Nigeria and co, because we have even the former British High Commissioner who was saying that she was fascinated with the result with the election where people had been killed. That has to stop. We must have that. And then also the international community and Committee of Nations must begin to treat political civilian coup the same way they treat military coup. And it's not the one that they're ready to work with anybody who rigs election, get into office, and then why in a way they are punishing, denying visa to some people who help to rig their election. But the people who ultimately get a beneficiary of the rigged election are the ones that they are working with. We cannot continue to have good governance in that way. And as long as we don't have good governance in our respective countries, it will also affect them in terms of the migration that they all talk about, because where there's no good governance, people will want to go to places where they can find good governance.
Okay. With the kind of money he will give to you, or he will promise you. So only God knows how much, but it's allegedly been said, and you know, many of the things we used to call rumors in Nigeria, we are now seeing are actually truth. But people are just saying it's just speculation. But it was said Justice Samani was given $7 million American dollars. That's alleged. But I tell you, there must be truth there. Looking at the type of judgment. And then the other 4 judges, each of them had $5 million American dollars. Calculate that in Naira. It will take somebody that really fears God to reject that and do like what that professor did in, is it Abia State? She rejected their money and stood for justice, stood for truth. But how many Nigerian judges are like that? We used to say, you know, everywhere we're saying that, you know, the judges are the last hope of the common man. No, 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 it has changed. It's a lie. They're the last destroyers of the common man for the sake of their own personal gain. They don't care what will happen to the rest of Nigeria. And they went ahead, received bribe, and came to mess up justice, twisted the Nigerian constitution, shredded it. And I mean, I don't know how we're going to ever regain the Nigerian judiciary. The world, the rest of the world, they are just laughing at us in Nigeria. Again, please, I need us to get this thing to over 1,000, possibly let's get close to 2,000 people online right now. Share it with as many people as you can. We need to talk. What's the way forward? What do we do as a nation? Because right now, Tinubu paid these 5 judges to do what they did. That's why when the judgment, well, after the judgment, and now Labour Party with PDP, when they went to collect the copies, the true certified copies, on top, that is the header on top, is Tinubu's legal counsel, legal team. It's written there, black and white. So what do we say? When any of you that is online that is still saying, no, you people should just accept defeat on a lie, broad day lie, cheating, bribery, corruption, and you want somebody like that to govern? It's just 3 months. See what Nigerians are going through. Do you want them to continue for another 4 years? No. I know Peter Obi and Atiku have said they are going to the Supreme Court. Hi, I just pray. I don't know what miracle will happen. Do you see a transparent Supreme Court with CJN, with Tinubu's former head, lead counsel, that is Ola Onipekun, whom Tinubu strategically made him the Attorney General and also made him the Minister of Justice? They will be the ones that will decide which judges will sit in the Supreme Court. And they can twist it anyway. So what do we do to reclaim our nation from these evil people? If we just say, let's wait and see, then you wait and see, on that day again, they may just say, we uphold the judgment that was made by the tribunal court. So what are you going to say then? And on what they do, just what they did again, they did not televise the hearing, all the presentation, the witnesses that came. People had to be transcribed, had to be writing and reporting to people who didn't see what was going on. But then they decided to televise, to allow people to stream the judgment because they wanted to humiliate Obi. They wanted to humiliate Atiku because Tinubu already called Atiku a serial loser. So he wanted to disgrace him. They already tell him to go back to Dubai. They're telling Peter Obi, forget it. It is Tinubu's turn, Emi Lokon. And that's why when the police and the army were everywhere trying to terrorize people on the day of the judgment, because they already had written the judgment before the 6th. That's why the army were everywhere. The police were everywhere. The same army that cannot deal with Boko Haram. The same army that cannot deal with all these the kidnappers. People losing their lives daily. And we don't see the army. We don't see the police. Suddenly they have the army to release against the people. But do you know during that same time when people were told they must not gather or to try and cause any confusion, do you know they paid their tout, their master tout, Asare Dokuba. And he came to Abuja, came not far from where the court proceedings were, where the judgment was being made. And nobody went after Asare. Because he's paid by Tinubu, he's Tinubu's head tout, just like Olumo in the West. So what are we saying? This is twisted. There is actually no justice. You say the judiciary are the last hope of the common man. No, they are the oppressors of the common man. That wasn't justice. We don't even call it injustice. It's outright evil and wickedness.
This is Bod TV Bod. In case the first time you come here, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more uploads.